Senor Zorro, at your service. In real life, of course, I'm Guy Williams. Just another American citizen who enjoys, as you do, our great heritage of fields, forests, and streams.
Don Diego de la Vega and his alter ego Zorro were created in 1919 by Johnston McCulley. His first story, The Curse of the Capistrano, was serialized into 5 parts. They appeared in the pulp magazine All Story Weekly. That same year, D.W. Griffith, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks formed United Artists, the first independent studio focused on artist intention rather than commercial success. Pickford and Fairbanks went on to get married in 1920, and while on their honeymoon, they discussed the next United Artists movie, The Mark of Zorro. It was released December 5th, 1920. The film, starring Fairbanks, was tremendously popular and spurred a pseudo-sequel, Don Q, Son of Zorro. As for Johnston McCulley, he went on to produce over 60 Zorro books. He passed away in 1958, just as Zorro was about to ride again.
The Walt Disney Studios present Zorro!
Walt Disney had purchased the rights for Zorro around 1952, but at the time no network shared his interest in producing the show. That was until 1954 when Walt started his own TV show, Disneyland, on ABC.
And now, Walt Disney. It's characteristic of American folklore that most of our favorite legends and fables are based on the lives of real men, like Davy Crockett of Tennessee.
The show Disneyland had many triumphs, one of which was the overnight sensation of Davy Crockett, which was produced as a 5-part miniseries and eventually as a film for Walt Disney Pictures. Due to the success of this, Disney was able to make a deal for Zorro. In June of 1955, pre-production on the series began. Disney Studios built its first permanent set on the studio lot. Constructions and furnishings altogether began to total somewhere near $500,000. But Disney still needed to find their Zorro.
Action, Guy. Nice to have you with us.
Well, it's nice being here.
Thanks for the loan of the horse.
Guy Williams, Walt's personal choice, was cast as Zorro, for his demeanor but also his skilled fencing technique. He was coached by Fred Caverns, who had previously coached Douglas Fairbanks in the role. All told, Guy Williams made an estimated $2,500 per week. With the Mouseketeers and the whole world waiting, Zorro was finally introduced to the public on Disneyland's 4th anniversary show. It aired September 11th, 1957.
Was Zorro a real person?
I'm afraid not, Moochie. You see, Zorro's a mythical character. He's something of our imagination. What's that?
That's your imagination.
Señores y señoritas,
Zorro!
at your service.
The series premiered October 10th, 1957 on ABC and was a hit with younger audiences right away. The theme song charted at number 17 on the hit parade. With the series off to such a great start, it was able to quickly attract major sponsorship deals. One for AC Spark Plugs, and the other for 7-Up. There was also Little Zorro, who appeared in the daily Mickey Mouse comic strips in local papers, and eventually, Little Zorro became an alter ego of Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Soon after, Zorro became a hit comic book series of his own, and pretty soon there were more than just toys. You could eat like Zorro, play like Zorro, dress like Zorro, shoot like Zorro. The public demand was so voracious that everyone wanted to be like Zorro. The promotion for Zorro continued with Guy Williams. He toured around the country making public appearances. Parades were thrown in his honor, and the public perception of him and the character rose to great prominence, although he mostly appeared as the character at rodeos. He was also the Grand Marshal at the Rose Parade, where he refused to ride a horse and instead led the parade in a car. It was also in 1958 that Disneyland began hosting Zorro Days. The majority of the original cast would appear, and this was commonplace in Disneyland, as the Mouseketeers would regularly appear there. Even Roy Moose Williams. Zorro Days were 3-day weekends. They were held 3 times in 1958, once in 1959, and once again in 1960. Henry Calvin, who portrayed Sergeant Garcia on the series, would speak on the balcony of the Golden Horseshoe. Suddenly, Zorro would appear. He would meet with foes traversing the rooftops until he was able to rappel down and eventually exit across to the Mark Twain. There, Zorro would clash swords with a man, fencing him until he was pinned up against the rails, eventually forcing him to jump into the water. Zorro would then appear on the very top of the riverboat, fighting with his opponent until they surrendered. Zorro would emerge victorious. There were 4 shows of this held a day, and while some of it was probably Buddy Van Horn, the Zorro stunt double, he would exit in the Golden Horseshoe and likely Guy Williams would enter, just as the parade would begin. The parade featured the Main Street Band, with Zorro following right behind them, and he led a procession with the rest of the cast. After the 4th show of the day, a fencing exhibition was held where Guy Williams could show off a few tricks, and even go up against a worthy adversary. Zorro Days were a unique opportunity where fans could get close and personal with their hero. It was also a chance for Guy Williams, too. With the help of this and other promotions, Zorro in its 2nd season was able to flourish. Eventually, this led to a dispute between Disney and ABC over who owned the rights to the character.
As you wish.
With contention mounting, its cancellation was inevitable. And in 1959, after 78 episodes, it was over. However, Walt Disney wouldn't give up.
Walt Disney presents Zorro, El Bandido.
Between 1960 and 1961, 4 specials were produced for Walt Disney Presents, in which Walt gave an introduction.
Stories are told of a legendary hero who lived in those outlaw days. A dashing young man who appeared as a gay bon vivant by day, but who wore this by night to ride the countryside as the champion of justice and protector of the oppressed. Hated and feared by those he opposed, honored and respected by those he defended, he was known as Zorro. And you are about to see one of his exciting adventures now.
After 1961, Zorro no longer appeared in Disneyland, and no more Zorro television was produced. But Walt Disney kept Guy Williams on staff with his salary for a number of years after. Walt Disney also continued to pay the Zorro royalty fees of $3,500 every year until 1967, when he relinquished the rights back to the Gertz estate after he had decided the public had lost interest. After Walt had passed away, Disney wasn't done with Zorro. He came back and Walt Disney Productions rolled on ice.
When the full moon is bright, comes a horseman known as Zorro. This bold renegade carves a scene with his blade, a scene that stands for Zorro.
It was in 1981 that Failed Entertainment first licensed Disney characters for an ice show. Through the years, several incarnations have been staged, and Zorro's been lucky enough to skate his way through a few.
Makes the sign of the sea.
With Disneyland unable to let go, 1993 Disneyland Paris hosted a Zorro show resembling the original Zorro Days stunt show. It was on the rooftops of Frontierland and featured Zorro fencing off against his adversaries until he eventually emerged victorious. 5 years later, Zorro would come back with full force in 1998 when Amblin Entertainment released The Mask of Zoro. The film starred Antonio Banderas, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Anthony Hopkins. It went on to gross over $250 million at the box office. A sequel was put into production, The Legend of Zorro, and it was released in 2005. And while the sequel went on to only gross $142 million internationally, its ad campaign and product tie-ins were aggressive enough to keep Zorro in the cultural zeitgeist.
Where's your horse?
Vamos, Tornado!
The next year, in 2006, Zorro and Alina began appearing in Universal theme parks. At first, they were available at Universal Studios Hollywood, where they would perform a stunt show in the Old West streets. They would face off against each other, fencing until they both passionately kissed.
Alright, if you guys want to take some pictures with us, we can start a line right over here.
This was eventually changed to a show in which Zorro and Alina would dance with each other on the Old West streets of Universal Studios Hollywood. Before they were eventually phased out, Zorro and Alina were available for meet and greets at Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Florida. In 2001, however, Sony filed a lawsuit against Fireworks Entertainment Group for producing a syndicated show called Queen of Swords. It lasted for one season, and as Sony claimed, copied protectable elements from Zorro character in Zorro-related works. However, since The Curse of the Capistrano had entered public domain in 1995, the district court case was dismissed. Following that, Zorro found himself in court yet again, this time with Z, a musical production that was being mounted in Europe. The Gertz company was suing for trademark copyright infringement, but the European Union laws on copyright are far looser. And by this time, Zorro had already been translated, teamed up, double-teamed, done, and redone. The EU ended up ruling that something as non-distinctive as Zorro was not trademarkable. This lawsuit is probably what spurred so many Zorro stunt shows to start appearing, like Movieland, a theme park in Italy that showcased rides from Terminator and Knight Rider. Around 2011, they started hosting a very colorful production of their own Zorro show, and at one point instead featured a Zorro dinner show. This eventually became a Wild West show. Just like Bobby Land, a theme park operating since 1961 in Belgium, which briefly featured a Zorro horse show that also now operates as a Wild West show. This again happened to the horse-centric Zorro show that briefly appeared at Pony Park City in the Netherlands. Following all of that, High Chaparral Parks in Sweden, which operates as an Old West ghost town with separate sections having different stunt shows, holds a Zorro show in its Old Mexico area, which began around 2010 and continues to this day. And while Zorro no longer appears in Disneyland, a few reminders will always linger. For now, Don Diego doesn't need to don the mask, at least in North America.
Euro Disney présente Sous le signe de la nuit.
Euro Disney, sous le signe de la nuit. Génial, l'aventure au galop. Chaque soir, le réveil à la pointe de l'été. L'été, on délira. Euro Disney, magique, tu l'aides à chaque fois. Euro
J'aurais vraiment tout fait dans ma vie. Euro Disney, l'aventure sous le signe de la nuit.